Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Tuesday, February 5th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the best films of the 2019 Sundance Film Festival. The Slash Film Editor-in-Chief, Peter Sciretta. And joining you on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer, Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Writer, Chris Evangelista.
Hi.
It's funny, David Chen even mentioned your intros on the latest edition of the Slash Filmcast, Chris. He was talking about the evolution from the kind of the sad highs to now the forced positive highs.
It's not forced. I am absolutely positive. I take offense to that.
Anyways, I just thought it was a hilarious conversation. Anyways, let's get into Sundance, because you guys have compiled the 15 best movies that you guys saw at the festival, and there's probably going to be a lot to talk about, but I feel like, these are movies like last year. What was last year at Sundance? What were the breakout films?
Well, we had Eighth Grade, we had Sorry to Bother You, Blind Spotting, Searching. Those are just the ones off the top of my head, but I'm sure there were more. Yeah,
year before, Get Out. So there are big movies that are going to make an impact later in the year, and this is the reason why you should care about what is going to be said on this podcast. Is you are going to be on the forefront of this in your friendship circle. You're going to be the one to be like, I heard about this film on this podcast that I think it's going to be good. Let's see it opening weekend. So let's get into it. Let's start with number 15, and that is Late Night. This is a film all three of you saw, but I know, Brad, you were the one I think that liked this the most.
Yes, apparently I was. I'll let Chris and Ben speak to that after I do my little spiel here about it. But yeah, I really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. It's directed by Nisha Ganatra, who has previously directed episodes of The Mindy Project and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's written by Mindy Kaling, who used to be on The Office before, and she also wrote and produced The Office before starting her own series, The Mindy Project. And she also stars in it as a woman who works at a chemical plant who suddenly gets a job as a writer on the all-male writing staff of a late-night talk show hosted by Emma Thompson. Not Emma Thompson in real life, but Emma Thompson has a character named Catherine Newberry, who is a very respected British comedian. And it's a really funny movie. It's definitely a crowd pleaser. It has elements of The Devil Wears Prada and broadcast news, but it's all set in the world of late night television. It has a great ensemble cast that includes Reed Scott from Veep, Paul Walter Hauser from I, Tonya, Hugh Dancy from Hannibal. John Lithgow has a small role in it. It's a great ensemble cast. It's really funny, very charming. Has a lot of energy in it. Emma Thompson is hilarious, as snarky and fierce as hell. Mindy Kaling does what she does best, also being delightful in her own way. And yeah, I really like this movie a lot. It was very funny and just a fun watch.
I really did not like this. This is one of those films I felt really bad for not liking, because it seemed like everyone at Sundance, I'm exaggerating, there were a few people who didn't like it, but it did seem like everyone at Sundance loved this movie, and I sat through this whole thing just stone-faced, what the hell? The entire theater was cracking up, and I was just sitting there what am I missing here? I mean, I love the premise. I love everyone involved with this movie. It has a great cast. I really like Mindy Kaling. I love Emma Thompson. So I was looking forward to this, but it just felt like a 2-hour TV pilot. And there's this thing going on where, Emma Thompson's character, her jokes have gotten stale, but then, so there's this early part where there's deliberately bad jokes, but then when she starts telling quote unquote good jokes, they just seem just as bad to me. I was like, what are these supposed to be the better jokes? So I like I said, I feel bad.
Are they better or worse than Jacob's insults in the water cooler?
Oh man, I think Jacob's insults are better, honestly, at this point.
Let's go away.
No, I'm kidding. They're obviously not. But like I said, I felt really bad because everyone seemed to love this, and I wanted to like this movie, but it left me cold.
Ben, are you the monkey in the middle here?
No, weirdly I'm on Chris's side in this one. I went in with the same like anticipation as everybody else. I was very excited about this, but I just feel like it feels like a movie from 10 or 15 years ago or something, and the comedy just did not land for me at all. And I had a really a strange experience, just like Chris, where it was like everyone was laughing in surround sound around us, and we were like, okay. And I feel bad about it because I love the movie. Clearly is wearing its heart on its sleeve. It has, I love the messages that it has in there. Its heart is clearly in the right place, and it's like a cool premise and everything. I just didn't think that the execution was up to snuff at all.
It should also be pointed out that Chris and Ben have a real problem with laughter and joy.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, let's move on to our number 14. That is The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Ben, tell us about this.
Yeah, so this movie is co-written and directed by a guy named Joe Talbot, who is a fifth-generation San Franciscan, and you really feel the love for that city and the sort of complicated feelings for the city in this movie. It's about these two black guys who are sort of struggling against gentrification and trying to make their way in the city. One of them, his grandfather built this really, really nice Victorian home in a really nice part of town, and the house has been vacated, so Jimmy, who is the grandson, moves in with his best friend and just sort of takes over, even though they don't actually own the place, and he's trying to reclaim this sense of identity. And the movie deals with issues of what makes a home, what's the difference between a home and a house, and how can you occupy a space in a world that is in some ways leaving people behind. It's a really poetic movie that I enjoyed a lot, and Joe Talbot, the co-writer and director, ended up winning the U.S. Dramatic Directing Award and the U.S. Dramatic Special Jury Award for creative collaboration for this film. So I would just say to put it on your radar, A24 has picked this up for distribution, but it doesn't have an official release date yet.
Cool. Number 13 on the list is The Nightingale.
Yes, this is the new film from Jennifer Kent, who directed The Babadook, and it's a very unpleasant film. This is actually my final film of the fest. I saw it the last night before I left, and it was kind of a downer to go out on because even though it's a good movie and I gave it a good review, it's really hard to watch. It's set in the 1800s in Tasmania, and it's about this woman who's a convict. She's a former convict, and she's basically an indentured servant to this army captain who is just this sadistic bastard, and he puts her through hell, and he does something really terrible. I'm dancing around it here because to give it all away would be a spoiler, but he does something very bad to her, and the rest of the movie is about her trying to track him down across Tasmania to get revenge. And she has an indigenous guide with her, and at first she doesn't get along with him because she's like a racist character, but they sort of learn to respect each other in this weird way. It's a very brutal film, and I don't say that lightly because I am not squeamish at all. I tend to be able to put up with violence in movies very easily. I don't know what that says about me, but I don't really get bothered by it. But this film in particularly was extremely violent to the point where it started to become oppressive. I was like, oh my God. And it's a little bit over 2 hours too. So by the time it ended, I just felt exhausted. And I went back to the condo and I was just like, man, I wish I had seen a more pleasant movie before I left. But beyond that, it's very good.
Number 12 on the list is Brittany Runs a Marathon.
This was one of our most anticipated movies from the festival. It was one of my picks, so I was very excited to see it. In the movie, Jillian Bell, who we've seen in 22 Jump Street and Rough Night, plays this directionless 27-year-old woman who spends her nights clubbing with friends, her mornings sleeping in, and her afternoons shuffling off to work late at an improv club. And she gets a little bit of a wake-up call when she goes to a doctor and finds out that she has an elevated heart rate, high blood pressure, and a fatty liver. And she kind of just throws her for a loop, and she realizes that she needs to start treating herself better and lose some weight. So she takes some inspiration from a divorced neighbor played by Michaela Watkins in her apartment building and decides to start running. She starts off running a block, then 2 blocks, and she keeps going. And in it, she kind of gets this, newfound confidence in herself and gets comfortable in her own body. And the movie is very much, on one level, feels like this typical inspirational sort of sports comedy, but it ends up dealing with a lot more than that because it dives into these emotional issues of really, appreciating yourself and, kind of understanding what it takes to be a good person beyond just getting yourself in shape. And Jillian Bell has a fantastic breakthrough performance here. Obviously, she's very funny, and her character lends to her sense of humor, and she's always making self-deprecating jokes and being the funny one in the group. But she gets to show her dramatic chops too. She puts in a great performance, really showing the sadder, introspective side of her life when she starts realizing that there's more that she needs to fix besides just getting her body fit. It's the directorial and writing debut of Paul Downs Calizo. He's a playwright, and he does a fantastic job with this movie. Has a lot of heart to it. It's just as funny as it is inspiring. It's another crowd pleaser. I talked to a lot of people who love this movie, and if you need any more evidence of that, it won the Audience Award in the U.S. Dramatic side at Sundance. So this is one that a lot of people are going to enjoy.
And it got picked up by Amazon, so you should probably see that later this year in theaters and on that service. Let's move on to number 11, The Death of Dick Long.
I was also looking forward to this. It is the directorial effort of Daniel Scheinert, who is one half of the duo who directed Swiss Army Man a few years ago. This movie is not nearly as sort of out there as that, but it does take a really weird turn. So the premise of the film is these three guys hang out in a band in Alabama, and one of them ends up dying mysteriously one night. And we spend the first half of the movie basically with the two survivors who are just complete morons, but in like a really funny way. They basically try to bluff their way through a series of escalating incidents trying to cover up the death of their friend. And the first half of the movie is just like laugh out loud funny. I think it's actually one of the funniest movies. It will probably end up being one of the funniest movies of 2019. But at the same time, it takes a turn when you learn what actually happened to the guy who dies. And it goes in a very, very different direction. And I'm not entirely certain that audiences are going to be on board for it, but it gets into some really sort of complex issues, and the movie always treats its characters with respect and never really mocks its protagonist, though that would be incredibly easy with how sort of cheesy and dumb they are. And they listen to songs like Stain's It's Been a While and like Nickelback and stuff on the soundtrack, and that's all completely unironic in this movie. But Brad, I know you saw this too. What did you think about it?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. This movie is hilarious. It has flares of the Coen brothers dark comedy, and the Andre Hyland and Michael Abbott Jr. are just this great dim-witted duo, but they're not dim-witted to the point of where it feels like an exaggerated goofy comedy. It's all very grounded, and it's just funny because they just don't think things through and they keep making these terrible mistakes. But yeah, the turn is a surprising and very unexpected twist in how the titular character is killed, and it gets a little less funny, but it doesn't necessarily lose itself. Or I didn't think I still found myself really liking it, and I think that if anything, it kind of, I don't know, it elevates it from just being a straight up comedy. It does have something to say, albeit with a very odd premise at the center of it. It's thankfully it has distribution. A24 already has it, and it's a good thing because I'm not sure if anyone else would have been brave enough to pick it up, because it is quite the oddball dark comedy.
Yeah.
Number 10 on our list is the only film you can see right now in your home, and that is Velvet Buzzsaw.
Yeah, I won't talk too much about this because we talked about this the other day on Slash Film Daily. But yeah, this is now on Netflix. It's a Dan Gilroy movie. It's about killer paintings. I know not everyone is on the same wavelength of this movie. Some people just thought it was too silly. Some people wished it had something more to say. It just worked for me. It's just very funny, and I laughed almost entirely through the movie, like from beginning to end. And I don't know, it just really worked for me. It's definitely a silly movie. It's definitely even maybe I'd say a stupid movie, but it worked incredibly well for me, and I'd be happy to watch this again. This is, of all the films I've seen, this is one of them that I definitely would watch again.
Well, I have good news for you, Chris. You can watch it now on Netflix, so you have the opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Number 9 on our list is Native Son. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, this is the first film from director Rashid Johnson. It is an adaptation of Richard Wright's 1940 novel, and it follows a character named Big Thomas, who is played by Moonlight's Ashton Sanders. He played the teenage Chiron in that movie. He is like he's a black guy living in Chicago who has green hair, and he loves punk music and Beethoven. He basically like defies stereotypes at every turn, and he ends up taking a job as a driver for this really wealthy white family, and the film, explores these issues of race and class, and eventually ends up taking a pretty surprising turn that almost pushes the movie into like a full-on horror movie. Maddie Libatique, the cinematographer of a lot of Darren Aronofsky's movies, shot this film, so it looks great. There's this really sinister aspect to it, and Sanders is really, really good in the lead role. Kiki Lane from If Beale Street Could Talk is in there as well. Bill Camp from The Night Of and Molly's Game is in there. Margaret Qualley from The Leftovers is there as well. So, it's a really good movie. I like this one a lot.
And has anybody picked this up?
God, I think this one is actually A24 previously planned to distribute it, but then HBO picked it up from them. So I think it's going to be on HBO sometime in 2019.
Okay, cool. Number 8 on our list is Big Time Adolescence.
Yes, this was another movie that I was very excited before the festival even started to check out, and thankfully it delivered. I was not disappointed. In fact, I was maybe even more impressed than I thought I would be. It's a movie that Sundance has seen several times before. It's kind of a typical coming-of-age comedy where you're following this high school kid as he's learning some lessons about growing up. This time it comes in the form of him sort of idolizing his older sister's ex-boyfriend, who is this kind of directionless drug-dealing loser named Zeke, played by Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live. And he's not, this total chump, because he's very affable and friendly and personable and hilarious. So it's easy to see why this high school kid, played by Griffin Gluck, would look up to him and likes hanging out with him. They're best friends. They have a great rapport with each other. There's just a lot of funny things that come up between them as they hang out. But obviously, the kid has a little bit to learn about what really matters in life, and that maybe he's heading a little bit down the wrong path and doesn't want to end up like Zeke, no matter how cool he might think he is. This movie is extremely funny. It's definitely one of the funniest movies I saw at the festival. Pete Davidson deserves, a lot of credit. Even he's not necessarily great at playing characters when it comes to Saturday Night Live, and here he's basically playing a version of himself of sorts. But he's very just pleasing to watch. He feels like one of your friends that you might have hung out with in high school, even if you didn't necessarily think that their life was going anywhere. It's definitely worth checking out when you see when it gets released. I was just looking at it. I don't think it's been picked up for distribution yet. So,
yeah, not yet. It has not been acquired yet. So hopefully someone picks this up. It sounds like it could be like an HBO kind of thing to me.
Maybe, I don't know. I hope it gets picked up sooner than later. But yeah, it's people will definitely enjoy it. So hopefully it gets snagged.
Number 7 on our list is Wounds.
Yeah, so Armie Hammer plays a bartender in this New Orleans bar that's sort of like overrun with cockroaches. And it was funny because Armie Hammer actually wandered around the Sundance Film Festival like spreading fake cockroaches throughout a lot of the theaters that the movie was going to be playing in. So he sort of got like some viral marketing going for the movie before.
Him himself did this?
Yes,
like he didn't have
himself. Yeah, I mean, I think he probably had a team as well, but I heard from people that like saw him like reaching into his pockets and throwing fake cockroaches on the ground. So he was apparently taking great joy in messing with people in this way. But yeah, the movie, he stars in the film. He plays this bartender, and he has a rocky relationship with his girlfriend, who's played by Dakota Johnson, and he still harbors feelings for his ex, who is played by Zazie Beetz from Atlanta, and she is amazing in this movie. It's her best movie so far, way better than something like Deadpool 2, which I appreciated her work in, but this actually gives her like a real character to chew on. And then everything really just sort of goes to hell when he picks up a cell phone that was left in the bar after a bar fight. And then the phone has some really, really gruesome imagery on it, but it also has this like supernatural effect on the people who it comes in contact with. And I won't spoil what happens, but it gets pretty wild. The director, Babak Anvari, he really sort of vacillates between tones. There were times when I was fully, mesmerized and like on board with what was going on. And then there were times in this movie where I'm like rolling my eyes like this is ridiculous. But there's something to be said for the fact that it really has this go for broke sensibility that made it compelling all the way through. So that one, I believe Annapurna Pictures picked that up, and that's going to be coming out in theaters this March.
Cool. Number 6 on our list is Honey Boy.
Honey Boy. This was one that we were interested in before the festival began as well. This was actually a good year for movies that we were excited about, mostly delivering on our hopeful expectations. This one is written by Shia LaBeouf and directed by Alma Harrell, and it is an autobiographical account of Shia LaBeouf's life as a child star living with his abusive and substance-addicted father. And it cuts back and forth in time from the time that he spent as a child star on the Disney show Even Stevens, even though it's not he's not exactly playing himself. It's a kid named Otis, and he's on a show similar to Even Stevens. And then 10 years later, we follow Lucas Hedges as the older Shia LaBeouf, who is kind of dealing with his own substance abuse issues and going through therapy at rehab and trying to sort through these demons that are in his life as a result of his, misguided parenting by his father. And what makes this even more interesting is that Shia LaBeouf actually plays his own father in this movie, and it is an astounding performance. He gives it his all, and you can really tell that it is a cathartic movie for him. He's really working through some stuff, and I think if he wasn't playing that role and it wasn't based on his real life, it might not be quite as harrowing, because that definitely adds a layer of interest for me, and it makes it feel a little bit more hard hitting. It's not entirely something that we haven't seen before. We've seen movies like Precious, and there's flares of the Florida Project here, but it really is the presence of Shia LaBeouf both on the page and in front of the camera that makes this work so well. Amazon,
I think, picked this up for $5 million, so we'll be seeing this probably later this year in theaters and on the service. Chris, you also saw this film, right?
Yeah, and everything Brad said is spot on. Shia LaBeouf's performance alone in this is phenomenal. It floored me, basically. I never actually thought he was a bad actor. I know he had some sort of like weird backlash against him. I think it's probably because of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Everyone was just angry about him being in that movie. But I always thought he was actually a really good actor to begin with. But with this, he proves how great he is, and it's almost like he's like exercising his demons with us. He's trying to explain to the audience basically what his behavior over the last few years has been about. Is because he's had a lot of public meltdowns and stuff like that, and this is why I'm the person I am, and it's an incredible movie. And Noah Jupe, who plays the young version of him, is phenomenal as well.
Yeah, he's getting acclaim. Shia LaBeouf is getting acclaim for across like most critics, and I think that's saying something. As you said, like I feel like he was one of those like punch boys for a while. It might be interesting watching this and going back to that season of Project Greenlight, where Shia was a kid in like one of his early films, because you get to see some of his like family life there and stuff. Number 5 on our list is a movie called The Lodge. Chris, tell us about it.
Yeah, this was on my most anticipated list, and it definitely lived up to the expectations. This is a horror movie. It's from the directors of Good Night Mommy, which is a German horror film, which I didn't actually like that much. But this I loved. Riley Keough plays this woman named Grace, and she's about to marry this man, and the guy has 2 children already. They're one of the kids is played by or the kid who played Bill in It, and so they're around that age. They're not quite teenagers. They're like somewhere in between, and these kids do not like their potential stepmother, even though when we meet her, she seems very nice and she tries really hard to, make an effort and include them and be like, here, get to know me. They're having none of it. And, so they start digging up dirt on her and they find out she grew up in this doomsday cult. And so she has this like traumatic background, and it's hard to go much further in talking about this because the more I say, the more I'm going to give away. But it boils down to Riley Keough and the two kids get trapped in this cabin or lodge, if you will, during this freak snowstorm, and they're all alone and the power goes out and things start going very, very wrong, and it's incredibly intense. It's legitimately scary. Riley Keough's performance is fantastic. I've talked about this before, but as a horror fan, I don't really scare easily, but this movie really got to me. Like, I spent the whole movie just in this incredible tense seating position. Just my fists were clenched. I just felt like I was gonna snap. That's how tense this movie is. So if you're a horror fan, you should really put this on your radar.
And this is coming from Neon, the distribution company, I think run by Tim League, the founder of the Alamo Drafthouse. This company has released films like I, Tonya, Ingrid Goes West, Three Identical Strangers, so that should be coming. The Lodge should be coming later this year. Number 4 on our list is I Am Mother.
Yeah, this is one of the few full-blown sci-fi movies that played at Sundance this year, and I really love this movie. It has a very, very, very familiar premise. It's about a girl who is raised in total isolation by a robot, and she thinks that the outside world, she lives in this bunker, and she thinks that the outside world is uninhabitable. But then one day, an injured woman played by Hilary Swank bangs on the airlock door outside, and everything is sort of thrown into chaos from there. Her world is turned upside down. The lead actress is a UK performer named Clara Rugard, and she is awesome in this movie. I feel like after seeing her, this is one of those instant star-making performances. She's terrific, and like I said, even though there's the premise and everything feels very, very familiar, it's all executed almost perfectly, especially the robot character, which is the mother who raised Clara Rugard's character. It's a practical suit that is worn by Luke Hawker, who is a guy who works at Weta Workshop and who designed the suit. And then there's also some digital enhancements going on in there as well. But this robot creation, for me, it instantly launched into the pantheon of really, the all-time great movie robots, up next to HAL 9000 and Robbie the Robot and the Terminator and all that stuff. It's that good in terms of the visual effects and how that character plays such a huge central role in the story. So I can't wait for you guys to see this. I looked it up, and I think Studio Canal is distributing this in Australia and New Zealand, but it doesn't have American distribution yet, so we'll keep an eye out for this one.
Yeah, this sounds like it definitely is going to get distribution. It feels like Netflix usually buys up these kind of genre things, but who knows? Number 3 on our list is The Farewell. I know a couple of you saw this, but Brad, tell us about it.
The Farewell is a very touching and funny family drama about this Chinese family who finds out that their grandmother, affectionately referred to as Nene, has cancer and only has a few months to live. But out of respect for her, rather than telling her that she has cancer, they decide to make her think that she's perfectly healthy. But they all want to say goodbye to her, so they plan this fake wedding so that they can all go back to China and say their farewells to her under the guise of this big family celebration. Awkwafina stars in this movie as a 20-something who really loves her grandma and is kind of questioning these methods. And as she goes back to China, she really gets in tune and in touch with her family, some of which they've been apart for a while because they moved so far away from home. And it's this really loving portrait of generations and family and culture. And even though it's very firmly based in Chinese culture, it's universal. Seriously, anybody who has ever had a grandmother, which should be all of us, will find themselves crying several times throughout this movie. It's beautiful. Writer-director Lulu Wang has made a very personal movie, and it's anchored by this incredible ensemble cast. And not only is Awkwafina great because she's doing something here where she's not playing this kind of goofy, quirky character. She's just playing, just a normal girl, and it allows her to show a whole different side to her acting skills. And the rest of the cast is filled out by people like Zima, Diane Lin, Zhao Susan specifically is fantastic. And it's just, it's the kind of movie that audiences are really going to fall in love with if they give it a chance.
Very cool. This Lulu Wang, when I was in Boston and making short films and stuff, she served as, I think, a cinematographer on a couple of the short films I made with my partner, Elaine Mack. So it's really cool to see that she is making it. Chris, you also saw this film.
This was, I think this was the first film I saw at Sundance, and I actually knew nothing about it. I went in blind, and it blew me away. It charmed me. I loved this movie. This is probably one of my top two of the fest. Everything Brad said is spot on, and also I just want to add to the Awkwafina praise. I wasn't not a fan of Awkwafina, but I thought everything she had done so far was like shtick. Like, she was playing very broad characters, and she was really good at that, but I was like, all right, can she do anything else? And with this, I was amazed at how layered and subtle her performance is. I think she's actually like a legitimately great actress after watching this, and I hope she does more stuff like this, because she has this, she has this range I never even realized she had. So that was like a revelation to me. It was like, oh wow, I can't believe she's this good of an actress. So I hope she keeps doing stuff like this.
If you told us 2 years ago that Awkwafina was going to be an actress that we were talking about, I think that'd be shocking. This film, The Farewell, is coming from A24. We don't know when, but probably later this year. We're now to our top two. Let's talk about number 2 on our list. It's Paradise Hills. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, I went into this one blind. I had no idea about anything, and I was completely blown away by this. It is the most impressive visual movie that I've seen in quite some time, especially for something with, theoretically a pretty low budget. I don't think they've actually released what the budget is, but the production design in this is like next level. The cinematography is unreal. It reminded me a lot of Tarsem Singh's The Fall, which came out in 2006, and that's like maybe a deep cut for some of our listeners, but for the cinephiles out there, the hardcore cinephiles, I'm sure many of you have probably seen that movie, and just drawing that comparison alone should be enough to get you guys to be interested in checking this out. It's a candy-colored fairy tale from a Spanish director named Alice Waddington. It's her first movie. It's kind of amazing in that regard. It stars Emma Roberts as this woman who's been captured and sort of trapped on an island that is supposed to be like an improvement facility for young women, where they're supposed to be have all of their individual quirks and personality traits basically like hammered out of them and returned to society as like complacent girls, basically. And there's some mysteries in there as well, and those are all really compelling. But man, those visuals are just, I mean, that alone is enough to make Paradise Hills worth seeking out. Unfortunately, I don't think it has distribution yet, so I'm really, really hoping that somebody decides to pick this up, because I want everybody to see this film.
Yeah, I think Lionsgate might be distributing it internationally, but no one here yet. And this was part of the next competition, which is a really cool competition I talked about in the most anticipated episode. Let's move on to our number 1. This was seen by 2 of our writers at Sundance, and it is a film called The Report. Chris, I think you were the one that liked this the most. Tell us about it.
The Report, it's from Scott Z. Burns, it's his directorial debut. He's worked with Steven Soderbergh a few times, and Steven Soderbergh produced this film. This is a political thriller / drama based on the true story of a Senate staffer played by Adam Driver, who was tasked with looking into the CIA's quote-unquote enhanced interrogation techniques following 9/11. And of course, as we all know now, they were basically just torture. And, the United States is not supposed to torture people. So, we basically sold our values out in a way. And it's I'm a sucker for political dramas, and this is one of those films where people run into rooms and they throw file folders down on tables and they start yelling, and I just love stuff like that. And Adam Driver's performance is so good. Like, he's tasked with rattling off so much information. It's a very talky movie, and he finds a way to make this all this talking really exciting. Just the way he delivers the lines in this really like rapid way. I can't think of another actor who could pull this off as well as he does here. And it's got a great cast. Annette Bening plays Diane Feinstein, which I didn't realize that's who she was playing until I saw the movie. And she's really good. It's way too early to start talking about next year's Oscars, but I wouldn't be surprised if, she ends up being nominated for her performance in this. And, it's a great movie. It's a very stinging indictment of almost everyone, like not just the Bush administration, even the Obama administration gets some blame here for, not following up on stuff. And it's weird. There's stuff in this movie that actually happens in Vice too, but it's done in a completely different way. And I actually wrote a piece, it's up on the site today, where I talk about how both films tackle almost the same subject in very, very different ways. And I think Amazon picked this up.
Yeah, Amazon did pick this up 2 days after its world premiere at Sundance. Brad, you also saw this movie. What did you think?
Yeah, I love this movie as well. It was my favorite of the festival. Everything Chris said is true, and it's infuriating because of that, just because of all of the things that you see that went down behind the scenes in order to get what is torture approved and sanctioned by the government, despite having no evidence that it was working whatsoever. This is a very dense movie. It's also a very quiet and subtle movie. It's along the lines of like a Spotlight or All the President's Men. There's so much information, and it's a lot to take in, and so it can be a little overwhelming at times, just simply because of most of the movie is just exposition and learning these things. But like Chris said, because of Adam Driver, he really cuts through it, and it doesn't need any like extra flair like Aaron Sorkin might give it, in a movie that he wrote. It's pretty straightforward, and a lot like Spotlight kind of let the story, of Catholic priests, molesting young boys speak for itself, and let the weight of that story hit the audience. That's exactly what this movie does too. It's definitely going to be one that people will want to see. I like Chris said, it is early for Oscars, but I think that this will be one that Amazon wants to push for awards consideration because it chronicles a very important and troubling time in our recent history, and it has a lot of acclaim-worthy performances.
It's always tough when you see something at Sundance and you want to say that this is going to be an award contender or best of year contender, but you're still in January. But, it happens all the time at Sundance. You see like films like Manchester by the Sea or Get Out or whatever, and you just have that feeling about it. You can read all of our reviews. We'll link to the reviews of those films in the show notes. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com. And also go to our iTunes page, give us a 5-star rating, write us a couple words, tell your friends, spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.